Hi, my name is Lindsay Bell,
I'm Sarah Perrette.
and we're going to talk about the abuse and neglect of disabled and glass children. So, what is abuse? Abuse can be physical, emotional, or sexual. Physical abuse is the non-accidental injury of a child. So this could be things like pushing, hitting, slapping, excessive spanking, just to name a couple examples. Emotional abuse is any parental behavior that causes serious impairment of the capacities of a child. So that can be a number of things, such as telling a child that they're worthless, making them feel unsafe, blaming them for things that aren't their fault, and manipulation. And then sexual abuse is any inappropriate exposure or touch by an adult to a child. So that could be things such as just inappropriate touching of any kind, grooming, or non-consensual sex. Okay, so what is neglect? Neglect occurs when a child's needs are not met, and the most common form of neglect is maltreatment. And there are three basic categories of neglect. So the first one is physical, which can include not meeting a child's basic needs. So that would be things such as shelter, food, clothing, showers, and then inadequate supervision of the child would also fall under that. And the second category is educational. So that would be when a parent fails to ensure that their child is receiving education, fails to enroll their child, allows them to be truant, or interferes with their education or development in any way. Then the last of those categories is emotional. So that could be just being emotionally unavailable to your child, ignoring your child, rejecting your child, things like that. And then in addition to that, some other forms of neglect are medical, mental health, and language. Okay, so what is a disability? A disability can be categorized as either developmental or physical. And just some examples are hearing or vision impairments, autism, serious emotional disturbances, orthopedic impairments, traumatic brain injury, and specific learning disabilities. And these are just a couple of the ones that you might hear of more often, but there are a lot of other disabilities in addition to this as well.
Some statistics that we found while researching this topic, 11% of all children identified as having a disability are abused or neglected. Children with a disability are 1.68 times more likely than children without a disability to be abused. Children with a disability are more likely to be neglected than abused. And children with a disability are neglected more than children without a disability. How does abuse affect disabled children? There are three main risk factors that make children with special needs more vulnerable to abuse. The first one are emotional demands in precarious situations. This means that parents feel that sometimes their situations are difficult to handle because of anger, frustration, feeling like they don't have power or control of a situation. These feelings were closely linked to lack of energy and exhaustion. The second main risk factor is emotionally closed environments. Parents often don't feel comfortable being vulnerable with professionals or people that they're talking to for advice. There's also a taboo on talking about instances where they felt as if they might hurt their child. A third risk factor is a gradual shift in responsibility from professionals to parents. This means that parents sometimes feel like they have to figure out how and where to get support on their own and don't have anyone to turn to. Parents also have felt that a lack of info from doctors resulted in a gradual shift in responsibility for the parents. Other risk factors include substance abuse by the parent was abused as a child, poverty, employment, and then being a single parent.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about sexual abuse specifically because this is the most common form of abuse that affects children with special needs. So children with disabilities are 3 times more likely to be victims of sexual abuse, and they're also less likely to disclose sexual abuse. And in addition to that, their disclosures are less likely to be taken seriously. Because many children with disabilities have communication challenges, it may influence their ability to actually disclose the abuse. children placed in out-of-home placements with many different caregivers coming in and out of the home increases their risk of sexual abuse. And there are some unique aspects of a child's disability that can increase their vulnerability to sexual abuse as well. And some examples of that are a child with a physical disability may require a lot of care, which increases the number of service providers who have access to that child. So that's just something that could put them at a risk for abuse. And then a child with a developmental disability may not always be aware of what is inappropriate or appropriate sexual behavior by an adult. So that might affect their ability to disclose sexual abuse or to recognize that sexual abuse is taking place. And just one last point on this, developmental service providers are the largest group that perpetrates sexual offenses against children with disabilities.
How does the abuse affect the families? Raising a child with a disability does put a financial burden on the parents. The extra cost could be for home treatments and care, renovations to the house, change in diet, or their medicine. Parenting skills may also need to be elevated, which can make the parent stressed, anxious, depressed, resulting in maltreatment. The parent needs to make more time to care for their child with a disability, which causes their schedule to change, which they may not figure out until they're in that situation. So like their work schedule or their at-home routine might change, which can cause them stress. And then because the parent is focused on the child with a disability, siblings may not receive as much attention and care. This is because the parent spends more time with the child with disability. The outcome is not spending as much time with their siblings. And then the result in the sibling being neglected and feeling unimportant. The sibling can feel unwanted, not cared for, or not as important. What are glass children and why do they matter? Glass children is a term used to describe children who have a sibling with a disability. The idea behind this is that the sibling is ignored and kind of looked through as a glass figure and not paid attention to, so they're not really seen. The parent may not realize that they are ignoring the sibling because the sibling may not speak up or are expected to put their disabled sibling before themselves. The siblings are also afraid to speak up and draw attention to themselves because of the emotional stress already on the family. They say that their parents are really stressed and they don't want to cause more stress on them than there already is. But siblings need as much attention and care as a disabled child because they are growing and developing. By not receiving proper nurturing and support when growing up, glass children grow up to be insecure, self-conscious, depressed, or anxious, or they could have like other more repercussions down the road from that. And then one important thing to remember is to never accept the sibling's answer of I'm fine or I'm okay. That's never the case. They're always just trying to like make the attention go to the sibling with a disability and not focus on themselves.
So there are a number of warning signs of abuse and neglect that you can look out for. So one of them would be bruising on hidden parts of the body. So that could be like their stomach or their arms or their legs that are typically covered by clothing. Changes in behavior is another one. So if they're usually a very social child, they become more withdrawn, or if it's the opposite, if they're normally really withdrawn and they start acting out, that could be a sign. Emotional disturbances, so unhappiness, depression, they have a bunch of new fears that kind of seem like they're coming out of nowhere, and uncharacteristic, inappropriate behavior. Lack of proper nutrition is another one, so you can recognize that if the child is very fatigued, or if they have a loss of muscle or a significant weight loss. Not receiving proper medical care when needed. An inappropriate parental behavior, so that could look like just inappropriate touching, aggression, or just overly controlling behaviors. An important point to make is that if you suspect abuse and neglect, you should immediately call the child abuse and neglect hotline, because you don't have to have solid 100% for sure evidence to report suspicion of abuse and neglect. Such as something to keep in mind.
And then how to prevent abuse and neglect. The first way you can prevent it is by raising awareness of the problem. So you can promote that children with disabilities are valued and unique, promote inclusion, promote, encourage workplaces and local businesses to promote inclusion and service. Another way to prevent it is by family-focused prevention. This can increase parent knowledge of child's development issues specific to their disability. A home visit program helps strengthen the parent-child bond and create a parent support group. Specific resources you can turn to for this are the Medical Home Model, the Pacer Center, and the ARC State chapters. Each of these provide programs to support and educate families with children with disabilities. Another way to prevent abuse and neglect are child-focused prevention. This means teach the child how to protect themselves, teach them about their body and sexuality, reduce possibility of isolation, maximize communication skills, and involve parents in their education. Some specific resources you can turn to for this are Kid Power, Teen Power, Full Power International, and Kid and Teen Safe. Both of these have programs to empower and teach children with disabilities how to respond to and prevent abuse in their environment. Another way to prevent abuse and neglect is prevention of outside abuse, outside of the home. So this can be done by screening job applicants thoroughly, training staff appropriately, maintaining the child-staff ratio at those after-school programs, safe and open environment, make sure caregiver knows needs of the child with a disability, be familiar with your child's caregivers, and discuss abuse and awareness with their caregivers. Some specific resources to turn to for this. One is safeguarding disabled children in residential special schools. And then if you would like more information about children with disabilities, how abuse and neglect affects them and their siblings, and how you can help, you can visit any of these resources. They're really informational, and you can find a lot about this subject if you're interested. And these are our references.